Hi, guys. Welcome back. Some of us develop body image issues from an early age. Today's YouTuber is Bunny Dreams, and she's going to share her body image rant. I hope you enjoy.
Like she said it like 2 days ago, like, you need to lose weight, like, you're too big, you're too this. And her reasoning behind that is because she's my mom and she feels like she can't. I used to be very thin when I was in high school, really typical. I think a lot of people have that experience where you have a fast metabolism and you can basically eat whatever you want and it doesn't really affect your weight. So that happened to me. I'm also 5 feet tall, and that's going to play a big role a little bit later on. I'm very short, so any bit of weight gain is very noticeable. So I was always pretty thin in high school. I've had friends that were a lot thinner than me, so I was always still, despite being thin, still a little bit bigger than everyone else. And I think that kind of messed with me a little bit in terms of, now that I look back at all those school pictures of me as a little kid, I was like, wow, I was really skinny. But back then I didn't necessarily feel that way. So once I graduated from high school, I took like 6 months off between high school and college, and I gained a lot of weight. I was not as active as I was before, and I was eating, I guess, clearly more, so I gained a lot of weight. Eventually I lost it, whatever. 10 years later, I'm now 27 years old, and I have once again gained a lot of weight. I had a very active job where I was working 30,000 steps a day. I quit it. It was super toxic. It was annoying. It was an animal related job, so of course I love the animals and I love the friends that I made in that job, but I had to go for my mental health. I just had to leave.
I think sometimes when a job is making you feel like your mental health is at stake, it probably is time to go. I notice a trend. I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but Venters, have you noticed that in almost every single situation where somebody was skinny back in their high school days, it's because they were active. They almost all to a T say it. And then she even said that other than her job being toxic, it was working with animals, which she loved, and she was able to walk 30,000 steps a day. That is just continuous walking, and she was able to stay skinny. And right as soon as she quits the job, or right as soon as she's done being a student, all of a sudden we pack on the weight.
I just had to leave. So because I wasn't as active, I started slowly gaining the weight. But I was also like on a diet and really heavily exercising because my engagement photo shoot was coming up. But after that was over, like after I had those pictures back and all that stuff, I gained a tremendous amount of weight. Like, I want to say, I'm being really dramatic, tremendous, like 20 pounds perhaps, maybe a little bit more. And when you're as short as I am, it's very noticeable. It's a very obvious change. I'll be honest with you that I'm a huge proponent of like the love your body no matter what size movement, but for some reason I'm just really hard on myself. Like, I hate the way I look. I hate where I gain weight. I'm basically an apple, I guess you can say. Like, I just gain it all in my stomach. Like, I look like I have a beer belly and I don't even drink. It's not super pronounced, but I notice it and it's getting to me. Like, I just hate it. I've always wanted a curvy body. I think when you grow up Hispanic, that's kind of like the standard of beauty. Like, you're black or you're Spanish, and they like curvy bodies. Like, Spanish girls are curvy, you're Spanish girl, and I was never really like that. I was on the petite side, like I mentioned. So it's constantly where I'm just not skinny enough, or I'm too big but not curvy enough, not curvy in what people consider to be the right places. And then it doesn't help that a lot of what you see on social media is very perfectly curated, or it's been altered in some way. It's more accessible now to be able to change your body with like Facetune or Photoshop. Like, back when Instagram was first introduced, I didn't even have Instagram growing up in high school. I didn't get it until after I had already graduated.
She brought up the fact that with black girls and with Spanish girls, the culture is that you want to have curves. I've noticed that over the past year or two, we've heard a lot about women getting this procedure called a Brazilian butt lift, where they're trying to get their backside to look a certain way. And there's a lot of troubles with women being able to take care of themselves and hygiene in that way. So again, I agree with her completely. There are some cultures where curves are considered the way to go.
But yeah, like, I wish I gained, like, if the weight that I gained went to my butt, listen, I'd be happy camper right now. Like, I'd be thrilled. but it doesn't go anywhere but my stomach and maybe my sides a little bit, like my waist, and it just doesn't look right because I'm so used to a very specific standard of beauty. So it's just super frustrating because I want to sit here and say yes, hashtag self-love, hashtag, it's just, I wish I could feel that way about myself. I can't, like, I just hate it. I hate how I look. I'm getting married in winter and I don't want to be this weight. I don't want to look this way. And if I could, like I said before, be curvy all over, I'd love it. If I had like that hourglass, that Coke bottle figure, love it. But I don't. And a lot of plus size models and people do have that really beautiful body shape, and it's just like, I want that, but when I gain the weight, it's not looking like that on my body. You know what I mean? And what it really comes down to is just my diet. I don't eat bad. Like, I feel like I don't. I mean, yes, occasionally I do the Chinese food, the McDonald's, like I do that, but really my problem is just the most ridiculous problem in the world. I drink too much juice, and I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at how much calories and sugar is in like Tropicana and apple juice and all of these things, it's a lot. And I can literally sit there, especially if I'm eating a meal, I can literally sit there and drink a whole giant container of orange juice or apple juice. Like, I am that addicted to juice and the sugar in it that I do feel like that was a very big contributing factor to me gaining weight.
I think in her case right there, she just said a lot. I think if she got rid of the juice and substituted it for water for probably a month or so and added a couple daily walks in there, I think she could lose 15 or 20 pounds pretty darn quick. I have a question for you guys to think about. I know that she brought up earlier the culture thing, and girls kind of have a thick body, and it's a real positive look that a lot of guys are attracted to. But I also noticed that they wear the real skinny jeans despite being thick, and it kind of holds everything together nicely. But when those clothes come off, doesn't that stuff kind of all loosen up and come all apart anyway? I don't know if it's a good look when your clothes are off.
At the height of my weight gain, the only thing that really changed, no, not my weight gain, my weight loss, I was, working with animals. Like, I was unemployed when the shutdown happened. Then we got called back in, and I lost a tremendous amount of weight because you're just working so hard, like in a farm-like setting. So I could eat like trash, which I wasn't really eating like trash, but occasionally I would have Chinese food and jump in bed and sleep the rest of the day. Like, I was able to keep the weight off because I was doing so much like heavy labor. Whereas once I was unemployed, I was walking maybe like 7,000 steps a day, not even 10,000, 7,000 steps a day, but it wasn't enough, obviously, to burn all the extra calories that I was now consuming. So it's just hard. It's just tricky. It's very frustrating. I want to just love my body for what it is, but I cannot.
All right, let's stop it there. Listen, guys, I feel like if weight loss was a riddle, she just gave us the answer. The more you walk on a consistent 7-day-a-week basis, because what happens when you work Monday through Friday? You usually end up going out with your friends and family, out shopping or out to eat or out to do things on the weekend. So you're still walking. So when you have a situation where you're walking a ton 7 days a week, guys, it becomes really difficult to be overweight. Now, I know a lot of naysayers will say, no, you're wrong, Jesse, you're wrong. But I'm telling you, when I go out to walk each and every day, I'm the only one out there other than one or two people, and there are regulars that are out there all the time with me. It's really hard to gain weight when you walk consistently. It's not a big riddle like she's making it out to be. She's telling us what the answer is. So why don't we go experience that answer now? Go get your shoes, guys. Let's go for a walk. Good morning, Venters. I hope you're having a beautiful day. It is August 1st, which I think is awesome, guys. August is usually about 1 degree to 1.5 degrees cooler on average per day than July is in Arizona. So where some people mix the two months together and say July and August are both miserable, and I probably would have said that in years past, now I'm trying to look at it from a positive aspect, that it's a little bit cooler than July, and it gets us that much closer to the fall, which is where we start to look at lower temperatures altogether as we head into the winter. What's interesting is I started this channel about 5 months ago, And 5 months ago, it was still pretty cool outside where I would have to wear the occasional jacket, right? Or light type of vest, right? And all of a sudden, here we are, 4.5, 5 months later, every single day is triple digits and it's hot as heck. When I first started the channel on my very first walk, I told everybody that I was 47 and a half years old, which was true. But now that we're in August, I'm only a month away from turning 48, which reminds me it's never a bad idea to start a good habit and a good walking routine now, because number one, no one's promised tomorrow. Number two, the older you get, the quicker tomorrow comes. So now instead of 47 and a half, I'm about a month away from being 48. Well, what's that mean, Jesse? It's the same thing. No, Bob, it's not. When you're 47, you're technically closer to 45 than you are 50. And when you're 42 or 43, you're technically closer to 35 than you are 50. But when you turn 48, all of a sudden you're closer to 50 than you are 45. And time keeps going by quicker and quicker. And the older you get, the more flabby your one becomes, and the more out of shape and more difficult it is to get back in shape. So again, if there's a piece of you that wants to delay until New Year's to do your New Year's resolution, and you try to validate this by saying, well, it's going to be here before you know it, that's true. But here's the thing. You're in decent enough shape to embark on a walking journey now. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. Do you really want to wait until after you have that health scare? You know, every day in this country, people start to feel like their arms going numb and they feel like they're having a heart attack. And some people actually are. Some people start to feel weird and all of a sudden they start to have a stroke. And every day that people go through these heart attacks and strokes in this country, let's be honest, that has a way of aging people by not just 5 or 6 years. Most people that go through a heart attack and stroke, it ages them by 15 or 20 years. You ever see a guy that looks like he's 70 years old and then you find out he's 45 or 50, but he just had, you know, this horrible widowmaker type heart attack that he survived? I don't know if you've noticed, but when people get through with strokes and heart attacks where they survive, it seems like they're never quite the same. You know, they go from being rugged, tough, athletic guys to all of a sudden they come across as an old guy, and many of them need canes, and you know, many of them are never the same health-wise. It's a downhill trek from there. I remember when I was younger, I went into a Spencer's Gifts. For people in my age group, we have an affinity or a love affair with Spencer's because when we grew up, that was one of those neat little stores that we liked going into in the mall. Why do I mention this? Well, when I was younger, for some reason, I equated a human life to 100 years when it's probably a little bit closer to 80 years that the average human, you know, lives here in America, or at least that's how it was when I was a teenager. It's gone down a couple years, I've heard. But when I went in there, they used to have these over-the-hill t-shirts. And I always thought that you were over the hill when you hit 50 years old. But if you do the math, we're really over the hill when we hit 40. And where most people do get their first 40 years, because let's be honest, most people, at least in America, Canada, and Europe, most of us live to at least see our 40th birthday. So your first 40 years, you're almost guaranteed. No one's fully guaranteed, but you know, if you grow up in a Western country and you have good access to health care and parents that'll take you to the doctors or the hospital if you look or feel sick, right? More than likely you're going to make it to your 40th birthday. But in the second half of your life, like I said, when I was younger, I thought that the second half of your life started at age 50. And maybe that's because of people like my grandma and her family members. They all lived to be in their 90s. So for them, the age of 50 really was their halfway point in life where they became over the hill. But for most average people in America,
your over the hill party starts at age 40. And your second half of your life between age 40 and 80, let's be honest, none of us are guaranteed that. So as we get older and we have these bad habits and bad routines, it's very easy to not really be able to enjoy that second 40-year segment of life compared to the first. As a matter of fact, I'd be willing to bet that if you polled 100 people, most people probably did enjoy their first 40 years a little bit more than their second 40 years. Now, some of them might say the opposite, but I think that's because as we get older, we learn to chill out, we learn to smell the fresh air and smell the roses, right? And I think what we do is we start to see that there's more to life than, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And for our first 40 years, we probably feel the opposite. So I bring up these things because the truth is you've never been as old as you are right now, and you're never going to be as young as you are right now. So if you look at it from that point of view, there is no better time than the present, than now, to get your shoes on and take a walk with the Venters. I am closer to the age of 50 than I am the age of 45. And when you start getting closer to the age of 50, that means that you're technically closer to the end of your life than you are the beginning. Things are not going to get easier going forward when it comes to starting a walking routine, going to the gym, eating better, avoiding sugar. Those things are not going to get easier as we get older. They're going to get more challenging. If you're smart enough to take this, you got to get out and start doing things now. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but the sun is totally behind clouds. Today, instead of 100 degrees outside, right now at least, it feels like it's about 85 to 90. But with the light being blanketed out by the clouds, it feels like such a beautiful day. It feels literally 5-10 degrees cooler with a tiny little breeze than it did yesterday. And I love it. So again, if you're listening and you just watch the reaction to whoever we have on the video from last night, there's a piece of you that at the end of each reaction, you turn off the video and go about your own way. But if you've listened this long, maybe there's a reason that you listened this long. And if you can start to walk with us just for the half hour every day that the show's on, it'll really, really change your life. Guys, I want to tell you about a fun little survey I read today on the Good News Network that I thought I'd share. They did a double opt-in survey of 2,000 sports fans by a place called Tucker Research. They found out that 32%, or roughly a third of us, and again, this was based on 2,000 Americans that they surveyed, they found out that 32% of Americans are moderate sports fans. I think a lot of us fall in that category where if the game's on, we will cheer for our local team. But if we miss the game, we're not going to lose sleep over it, right? 48% of us consider themselves the type of fan that will watch most games. So in other words, if a game's on TV, you'll watch it. If it's on pay-per-view, maybe not, right? But we try to be involved in most of the games that we can. But again, I assume when most of those people miss a game or two, they don't jump off of a bridge or anything. 20% of us, however, 1 out of every 5 of us said that when it comes to their sports teams that they cheer for, they consider themselves all in and they go out of their way to watch every single game. Now, these 20% of people, in other words, 1 out of every 5 of us, they tend to spend on average about $800 a year in merchandise. What's that mean? That means every time they draft a rookie, they are first in line to buy their jersey. Every time that sales go open for the upcoming season's tickets, right? They are on the phone making that call, and in many cases buying those season tickets. And when you see the occasional fan that is littered in body paint, it's one of these people. 14% of people say they are literally bummed out and depressed for days on end when their team loses. And by the way, I've met people like this. Believe it or not, one of the biggest sports fans that I ever met was my grandma. And we would listen to sports games on the radio when I was a little boy. So it's weird. One of the things they used to do in this country is families would actually sit around the radio and listen to sports broadcasters and commentators talk about the game over the radio, because in some cases TV was not an option. So it's weird when I think about life from the early 1900s, a lot of times I think a little bit more about radio than TV, because let's be honest, people pre-1960, many of the families in America didn't even own a color TV or a black and white TV until, the 60s and 70s and stuff. So again, when I think about my grandmother, she grew up in an era where there was no TV for so many years. At least nobody consistently owned them. And from what I understand, even when you owned a TV in the 50s and stuff, it's not like there was many channels to choose from, and it was like nothing like it is now. So we would listen to Phoenix Suns games on the radio, and man, I remember she would get so worked up that I, as a little kid, would cry because the Lakers would beat the Suns, and they beat us all the time. So it was like a handful of times every year I was in tears because of what the radio said about the game. It was really, really crazy. Here's the funnest part of the survey they took. So 14% get legit bummed out when their team loses. That might describe you when your favorite team loses. 31% believe that their pregame ritual, whether it's them putting on body paint, whether it's them going out and meeting up with fans and doing tailgating. Tailgating's real popular here in the US. It's where they all go to games hours before the start of the game, and they'll barbecue out of the back of their SUVs and out of the back of their trucks. And a lot of diehard fans meet and befriend a lot of other diehard fans during these tailgate sessions. But check this out. When your uncle is drunk and he puts his head on a bat and he does one of these things, right? And then all of a sudden he's dizzy and he's falling over. 31% of rabid sports fans believe that shenanigans is actually going to help their team win. Is that crazy or what? But you want to know something? A lot of us are like that. I don't see too many rabbit's foots nowadays because I think that's kind of considered not so good. But when I was a little kid, a lot of people would have a rabbit's foot keychain. And I don't know if they were real or fake, but I have a feeling some of them were real. If any of you guys owned a rabbit's foot, let me know. But basically, a lot of people owned a rabbit's foot for good luck. And if you've never heard of a rabbit's foot and you're thinking, what the heck is that? It's a rabbit's foot. Imagine this furry looking, finger looking thing with a couple little toenails hanging out of it. That was a rabbit's foot. And people would actually have these on their keychains like crazy. I would be willing to bet that 1 out of every 15 or 20 people had a rabbit's foot. Now, if you don't mind admitting that you were cruel enough to own a rabbit's foot back in the day, raise your hand, because I know for a fact my mom had one. And I know for a fact out of 1,000 people, I'm sure there's a handful of you guys that had a rabbit's foot for good luck. But 31% of people believe their pregame ritual is going to help their team win. I remember when I was little, I would ask for victory, right? I would ask God, let us win, and I'll do A, B, and C. And you start to realize, well, if God lets your team win, then somebody praying on the other side, he's not letting them win. So more than likely, God doesn't really care who wins the game. He cares probably more about the fact that people try their best. If he cares at all, if he exists at all. To my non-believing friends, we're not just going to assume he exists. But to my believing friends, we know he does. And we know deep down, even though he doesn't seem like it, he loves the Phoenix Suns. My grandmother's favorite team was the Phoenix Suns growing up, because we did not have a pro football team back then. and we did not have a baseball team. We had the Phoenix Suns, and they have never won shit in their whole existence, which is going on 60 years. They haven't won nothing, right? Now her favorite team, and this happened about 20 years ago or so, maybe 25 years ago, her favorite team the last part of her life was the Arizona Diamondbacks, where the Phoenix Suns never won anything, where the Cardinals here in Arizona never won a thing. The Diamondbacks won the World Series against the Yankees back in, I believe, 2001 or what have you. So that was one of those moments that, looking back, I'm glad that my grandma got to experience one of her teams winning a world championship, before she passed away. Are any of you guys rabid fans? If you are, who took you to your first sporting event? Was it one of your folks? Was it one of your grandparents? Was it one of your best friends? Do you consider yourself one of these rabid fans where you try to go out of your way to watch every single game? I know Mala is a big fan of Boston sports, so I assume she likes the Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins. When you get to, and the Patriots, of course. When you have teams that routinely win championships, like happens in Beantown, right, in Boston, I think it leads to a lot of rabid sports fans. When you have teams like we do in Arizona, where they constantly get their butt kicked by teams from LA and Boston and Texas, you just kind of get used to losing. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. What do you guys think? You guys think if you get used to losing all the time, it's a bad thing? Probably, right? But at the same time, if you can keep things in perspective, that life isn't fair, that sometimes no matter how bad we want something in life, whether it's a team winning a championship, whether it's hoping that a guy or a girl will go out with us on a date, or whether it's hoping we can lose 20 or 30 pounds, right, to take control of our health, some of these things are difficult. Some of these things aren't in the cards for us. But we have to keep pushing forward. Just like my grandma did. She won a championship with the Diamondbacks in the early 2000s, and for the last 20 some odd years before she passed away, she watched every single game that she could in hopes that they would win a championship again. Last year, after she passed away, the Diamondbacks ended up making it to the championship game, and I thought, oh my goodness, my grandma and her sister are at the game. Now keep in mind, they were both passed away, but I'm watching these games and I'm like, my grandma and her sister, Minnie, are there. They are rooting for the Diamondbacks. It is meant to be. But of course, we didn't end up winning the championship. So if they were there in the stadium as ghosts, they were still experiencing losses. I've always loved sports, but one of the things that I found out as I went through junior high and high school was that I wasn't going to be 6'3", 225 pounds of muscle that could run a 4.4 40-yard dash. I wasn't going to be that person no matter how much I wanted to be. I was going to end up being 5'9", 165 pounds, slow as molasses, not very strong, right? I was a really good athlete from K through 6th grade. And then as everybody hit puberty and goes from being a boy to a man, somewhere in there I got lost in the shuffle of the genetic lottery. And I had to quickly realize, hey, I'm not going to be able to become a millionaire playing sports. But I can still be active because there is something that sports teaches us. It teaches us that when you lift weights, your muscles start to develop and you get stronger. When you practice your sprints, you get a little bit faster, right? Within limits. When you practice the long runs and you practice getting your stamina up, it does equate to a better version of you. So since we're no longer in sports, and many of us haven't been in sports in decades, what can we do with that knowledge? My thinking is, let's use that knowledge. We're no longer lifting weights for the upcoming football season. We're no longer going to the batting cages for the upcoming baseball or softball season. Now, we're trying to extend the second half of our lives. Here's the good news. We don't have to do sprints. We don't have to do 1,000,000 push-ups and sit-ups, and you don't have to work on your maximum bench press or squat. I believe in my heart of hearts that all you have to do to win in the game of life is try your best to start something small like a walking routine. You have to learn to crawl and walk before you run. So when you think to yourself, how the heck do I get ahead when it comes to my health? Yes, you can go to the gym and start working out 5 or 6 hours a day. But more than likely, that's you trying to go from crawling to running, and you're skipping the walking in between. The best way for you to start things in life, in my opinion, is through baby steps, or what we like to call Kaizen. It's the idea that if you're a little bit better today than you were yesterday, you're going to be on your way to greatness. You don't want to stay stagnant. You don't want to sit there and say, I'm going to maintain where I am now for the rest of my life, because as we age, we naturally go downhill. So if you want to maintain, you don't want to do so by staying still. You want to maintain by increasingly baby stepping your way up. So how can we apply that? Well, yesterday I started talking with you about doing a little extra credit. And sometimes there's days like today where the weather is absolutely beautiful, so you don't necessarily need to do an afternoon walk. You can take care of your walk here before you go to work. But at work every day, you're probably ditching work to go to McDonald's or Wendy's. And when you go to McDonald's or Wendy's, you're probably getting a meal deal where you get the burger, you get the fries, and you get the drink. And then because your mind, when it deals with money and calculations, you know that the best value is to go ahead and go large on that meal deal. So you're making it where in addition to your Whopper, you're also purchasing an extra large French fry and an extra large Coke. Now, what if we could change your idea of what lunch is at work? And what if all of a sudden you could start going to McDonald's or Wendy's like you normally do? But how about instead of a Whopper, how about you eat the baked chicken sandwich that they have? How about instead of the large soda and large fry? Good morning. How about instead of the large soda and the large fry, how about you cut that down to the small soda and the small fry? Just that little move 5 days out of the work week are going to be huge. How about instead of that soda, you switch over to the blue Gatorade, right? The Powerade, or even the High C. Is it still sweet? Yeah, but it's slightly less sweet than the soda, and there's no caramel colorings, right? So I have a feeling that High C is just a better version of a sweet drink than Coca-Cola is. Forgive me, Coke. What you could also do is you could take that French fry and you can make a friend at work by going up to a friend that maybe doesn't have that much funds and by bringing them your French fries. Let them have your soda. Drink water. You know, one of the things that you agreed to do when you agreed to walk with me is that you were going to walk, you were going to try to drink water, and you were going to try to avoid sugar. Well, golly, if we could get rid of your soda that you have every lunch and replace it with sugar, or replace it with water, God, don't replace it with sugar, replace it with water, all of a sudden this meal at lunch that is making you fatter and fatter each and every year, all of a sudden you're going to start conquering this lunch, right? And then imagine if you have an hour for lunch and it takes you only a half hour to eat your lunch, you're left with a half hour where you're just sitting there BSing with coworkers. Why don't you go walk the building? If you have a giant warehouse, walk inside. But if you have a giant outside and you're in this small little office, why don't you go out and for half an hour until the shift starts up again, why don't you go for a little 15 or 20 minute walk during lunch? So what happens if we do this? What happens is all of a sudden, instead of gaining a pound every month from your lunches at work, now you're starting to break even or even lose a pound. That's going to have multiplicative effects, not from day one, but from month number 2, 3, 4, and on. I'm telling you, I would go every day when I was working at the office at various jobs, not the one I'm at now. But I would go every day with my coworker, and we would go to Del Taco on Monday. We would go to Chipotle on Tuesday. We would go to Wendy's on Wednesday, and we would go somewhere else for Thursday and Friday. We were literally getting fatter every day just from the meal we were having at lunch, you know? And a lot of times I would skip breakfast because, you know, you wake up late and you're like, God, I got to get to work before the shift starts. So a lot of times you're starving by lunch, and that makes it where you want to eat something bad that's quick also. How can we proactively get over that? Well, if you're like me, you could buy a bag of snap peas or baby carrots, and you can even keep it at work potentially, unless you have a food thief at work, which sometimes we do. But there's nothing from stopping you from literally getting a lunch pail or lunch bag, putting in one of those little freezer packs to keep your food cold. There's nothing really stopping you from taking your lunch to work. And if you make yourself a little ham sandwich on some whole wheat bread, right, or whole grain bread, you might be able to enjoy your lunch just as much as going to McDonald's or Burger King. The only difference is your lunch will cost a fraction of the price. God, I don't know if you've noticed, but these meal deals are running 12 or 13 bucks or even higher. Do the math, 12 bucks times 5 days a week. Guys, that's 60 bucks a week. That's 250 bucks a month. If you could save that and lose some weight and extend your life at the same time, the last I heard, that's winning. So again, these little things that we're doing, you know, I'm not leading a class where I'm like, okay, now let's go lift some weights and let's do this, that, and the other. But neither are those other YouTube channels. They're talking about things, right? They're giving you ideas of how many sets and reps you can do. But this is one of those channels where if you just get out and walk with your Venter brothers and sisters, you're going to start to see some amazing results. I think the way we determine if we're winning in life is if we can start living to age 80, 90, and 100 rather than, dying in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. I think it's a darn shame when people only live to their 50s. And I think it's also a shame that we don't get clues about when we're going to pass. Wouldn't it be interesting if we all knew the day we were going to pass? And what if we knew that, hey, we're going to pass away when we're age 63? There's only one thing we can do to extend that. We have to walk 5 miles a day. Guess what? You'd see a lot of people outside walking 5 miles a day just so they could live a couple years longer. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I knew my expiration date and I knew the only way I could extend that is walking 5 miles a day, guys, I'd be walking 10 miles a day, you know? Not that I don't believe in eternal life and stuff, but my goodness, nobody is promised tomorrow, and what we believe is faith. It's not exact, it's not perfect, it's not guaranteed, right? So what you do is you try to do your best to be as healthy as you can so that you can be in the life of your family members and loved ones for as long as possible. So again, today, you're going to work. Take a walk before you go to work. If your boss gives you an hour for lunch, don't sit there twiddling your thumbs talking to your coworker. Put your walking shoes on, go outside, and take a 20-minute walk each and every day. Let's start canceling out those calories we have at lunch, and let's start making good decisions. And with that being said, just because my walk is over doesn't mean you can't do some extra credit. If you have another hour before your job starts, go take another 20-minute walk. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day.